Welcome in, everybody. American and Leeds podcast on Thursday. We are going to get stuck in right away and talk about everything that's going on with the club. First of all, let me introduce everybody. We'll go clockwise. We have at LUFC America, aka Nate. Nate, congratulations! You just got married. Big round of applause for you, my friend.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Um, Nate is a newer fan along with me. I've been a fan since Monk. Um, he came along. He went to, I believe, the University of Leeds, did a study abroad program there, or fill me in if I'm wrong. But you've been a fan. You saw Bielsa ball live in person. Chris, newer fan, really started off in the Premier League, but is coming down to the championship with us. So big thumbs up for you. Panikkar, same as me as well. We're all kind of we were there for the promotion, but also, now obviously we're down for the relegation. And Jir, big shout out to him. Massive asset to the LUFC community, being a daily Leeds United content creator and also understands the tactics that's happening being a UEFA B coach. I remember I reached out to you, Jir, and your most viewed video when I first reached out to you was a vlog. I think you did a couple of Leeds United the views, and your channel has absolutely taken off since then. So if you're not following Jir, you're messing up as a Leeds United fan. Please follow Jir. Let's get stuck in. We'll just kind of keep this clockwise thing. If you guys want to ask each other questions, I love when that happens. Let's keep it conversational and loose. But Nate, the fixture list just got released. What fixtures are you most looking forward to? Is it finally real that we've been relegated? How are you feeling about that?
That was my biggest takeaway. Was like, wow, it had to happen at some point. It had to sink in at some point. And if the last month or so hasn't been enough time, I think the fixture list was it. So nothing really stood out to me, other than maybe some relatively favorable fixtures to start out. But much like last season, I felt the back end or the last month of the season will be really tough. So once again, it'll be key to get out to a good start, but certainly a tough. All eyes on that last fixture at home against Southampton. That's one that really caught my eye. You wonder how important that'll be at the end of the season, but it's real. It's happening. There's a schedule now.
May the 4th be with us, I think, is that last fixture. Hopefully we'll be celebrating a promotion. Chris, how are you feeling now that the fixtures have been released? Is there any one that kind of looks tasty to you?
Well, I think first of all, I have a lot of work to do just to learn all these teams. I think the Premier League was kind of the extent of my capacity, just with what I could absorb with Leeds. And now, I'm not as familiar with the championship, but I'm learning. I'm looking forward. I guess that excites me, just to see new teams, new players, learn about the league. As far as the list, it is kind of depressing, to see or to not to see the Arsenals and the Man Cities and the teams you're more familiar with. December looks terrible in terms of the number of fixtures, middle of the season. I think one thing that concerns me, and this goes back to last season, is just what is our fitness levels going to be? I really think we ran out of gas last year. I think the players, there could have been some motivation issues, of course, but I think they just looked tired. They didn't look like they could sustain over the course of a season. It looked like they ran out of gas. So that concerns me, just with the number of games. But overall, excited to learn new things.
Leeds was kind of in a time capsule, and they call it the wilderness. And it came up for 3 years, and now it's back down. I think there's part of me is a purist. There is some advantages, I think, in being down here, or some, I don't know, silver linings, but we'll get into that later. Brendan, what do you think?
I was feeling left out last week when the fixtures came out for the Premier League, that's for sure. And that's when it first hit me very hard that they were no longer in it, especially once their logo, all references to them were taken off of the website. They got the unfollow on social. I'm just like, okay, it's real. And then another wave hit me today where I'm like, okay, the fixtures are out. Now we know when we're playing teams, but going through the list, Cardiff, Birmingham, West Brom, Ipswich. Okay, cool. I guess the one kind of goodish thing to kind of keep you excited about some fixtures is how many teams have been in the top flight the last like 7 years. Like you go through the list, West Brom, Hull City, Watford, Southampton, Norwich. There's a Leicester, of course. There's a bunch that have been in the top flight recently. So there still will be some good teams that come to Ellen Road and some good stadiums and away days for fans to go to. But I think the thing that caught my eye going through the fixture list was the end of it looks very tough. Like you go into April, you have Hull, who were decent, kind of flirting with a playoff spot for a little while last year. Coventry, obviously, we all know, lost to Luton in the playoff final. Sunderland were in the playoffs. Blackburn had a good season. Borough were in the playoffs. QPR started really hot, and then they barely survived. And then they finished with Southampton. So kind of like what we all said going into May of this past year is you better have safety wrapped up in April, or else it's going to be a relegation battle in May. Now it's you better have a playoff spot at least confirmed going into April, because I would expect almost every team they play in April in that one Southampton game in May to be huge for playoff positioning. But hopefully we're in the autos and we don't have to worry about it.
Cheer.
What Brendan said. Pretty much. I think it's slightly different this time around. There's still a lot of people who think, this is the end of the world for Leeds, because the last time we went down, the last time we got relegated to the Championship, we had a fire sale of players. We sold our ground, we sold our training facilities. We didn't have any team starting that season. We put together a team of free agents and loans to start that season. We didn't have enough squad players. And even at that, we still got to the playoff final before we got absolutely smashed in the playoff final and then got relegated the following year to League One. So it's a big difference this time. New ownership, potentially more money. The only uncertainty coming into this is, as much as we don't know what situation these clubs in the division are going to be like next season. So, like Brendan naming all those teams, it's the first thing I looked at when I saw the fixture schedule was December and April look very familiar. It's the same block of games, it's the same teams. If you go through that as well, you've got teams that are in the playoff final, teams that got to the playoff semi-final. Now, there's no guarantee they're going to do that again. The one that stands out to me to be worried about a little bit is if you look at Middlesbrough and West Brom, Michael Carrick didn't start the season with them. They were in a really bad position. He came in, took over the club a good bit through the season. They went on an incredible run and just missed out on the playoffs. You look at West Brom, Corberán had a 51% win ratio, only took over a third of the way into the season. So if you were to apply that 51% win ratio to a full season, he wins the league. That's a winning league percentage. 43 to 51% gets you promoted, or gets you at least in the conversation about promotion. We're now but the same can be said for Leeds as well. We don't know what kind of team we're going to have. We don't know what manager we're going to have. We don't know what players are going to be here. We don't know what players we want to keep here outside of whether they want to stay or not. And then we don't know what's going to be brought in. So you're hoping to get that clarity in the next week or so. And I think once the manager situation is sorted out, hopefully early next week, but it looks at things now, according to the Yorkshire Evening Post, it could be Sunday or Monday before there's an announcement made. Conflicting reports on that. The team talk are saying that Vieira will get the job in the morning. Be confirmed tomorrow. But then, as I said before, Team Talk kind of have to get this right, because it's a big breaking news story for them. They were the ones that also broke the exclusive that QSI were buying into Leeds in January, which was turned out 30 minutes later to be incorrect and an absolute dud of a story. So if Team Talk get this one wrong, they've gotten two huge major exclusives about Leeds incorrect. If you follow Graham Smith reckons that won't happen tomorrow because Leeds are interviewing somebody today. So that can't happen. And he reckons it'll be into the early part of next week. So you bring all that, there's a huge amount of uncertainty in there. But assuming the positives, assuming that the 49ers have their house in order, the manager situation is pretty much word for word in with their recruitment dossier that they had for the 49ers. If you assume that all that's in place and they've got a good manager, or even a half decent manager with a good squad, Leeds should be in the mix. But I agree with what Brendan said. I would be worried coming into April that if we're not in the mix, that you could fall away from the mix if things aren't going particularly well. If there's a bit of a wobble at Christmas, it's a tough run. And did a stream earlier on my channel, and there was a unanimous agreement that Southampton will not be a force next year in the Championship, that in fact Southampton could struggle because they could go through a whole rebuilding project now and it might take them a bit longer to kick on. It looks like it's us and Leicester as favourites right now, but if we need a big summer to get things right, the attitude, the temperament, the culture and the identity of the club has to become correct again and back to what it was. Otherwise, it'll be a struggle for Leeds and it could be a 2-season job. But assuming everything goes well, it's a good opening to the start of the season. The first month is encouraging. It's teams that have struggled and we've beaten before. You know, you're in the Championship when you're looking at fixtures and you're seeing Plymouth away. And you're like, yep, that reality has dropped in on us, all right. So it's not the worst start, but a really tough finish and a really tough December, depending on how our house is put together.
And Plymouth away right after Swansea away too. It's just like, come on.
Yeah, it's Bristol City away, Rotherham at home, Swansea away, and Plymouth away. You're like, oh, God, it's the Championship, isn't it?
February just looks brutal from an excitement perspective.
Yeah, anything outside of top 6 would be very disappointing, I think, for the club. Obviously, a lot of fans want automatic promotion. They want top 2. I want this next section of the podcast to really kind of be, I'm going to try to set a little bit of a stage, and then Brendan, kind of fill in the gaps, because I think you probably know more about this than I do. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the 49ers. The 49er ownership enterprises different than the actual club. But really at the head of it, you have Denise, I believe, right? Bartolo York. She is the sister of Edward, who is kind of the godfather of the 49ers that won 5 world titles. So when you look at Leeds and you look at the 49ers, they are very similar clubs in the fact that they won trophies in the 80s and the 90s. Maybe Leeds was more 70s, and then obviously a title in the 90s, early 90s. But they are similar kind of projects that Parag has undertook. Underneath her, you have Jed York, who's the son of Denise at 43. And he seems to be, he's on the board, and he seems to be kind of, those are the 2 money people that really are going to be kind of the man behind the man, or the people behind Parag. So just talk about the 49ers, how Jed has kind of taken the reins in the 49er club, and their, I guess, rebuilding process would be the best way to talk about it, since he took over for his uncle, and Denise took over for his uncle, who was marred in a scandal. I didn't have time to unpack this, but he was marred in kind of a bribery scandal somehow in Louisiana. And they got their wealth really from construction. If you've ever been to America and been to our suburbs, we like strip malls. And that's how they got their wealth. They built, to my knowledge, strip malls, and we're in the kind of construction business of that. So Brendan, fill any gaps that I missed, and kind of like being a massive fan of the 49ers, like how have you seen that club get back on the rise?
So Denise DeBartolo York is the daughter of Eddie DeBartolo, and the DeBartolos owned the 49ers in the glory years when they had Joe Montana, Steve Young, Jerry Rice, all those guys, and winning 5 Super Bowls under the DeBartolo reign. And then when some of them passed, the team went down to Denise. She married John York, and then the club became in possession really of the Yorks. And so Jed, who is the son of Denise and John, really is the one who controls everything day to day. He owns the club. And I think we said this a couple of weeks ago, last time I was on. He's made his fair share of mistakes in the past. Being a young guy who comes into complete ownership of a football team as rich of a history as the 49ers, one of the most successful in NFL history, had a little bit of an ego check that he had to have. And that led to some questionable decisions, coaching firings, bad hires. And so they've either been, under his reign, incredible Super Bowl contenders and probably should have won a couple Super Bowls by now, or bottom of the NFL. And when they're in the bottom of the NFL, the Yorks usually right behind it, especially Jed. However, luckily, in the last couple years, they figured it out because they nailed their head coaching hire with Kyle Shanahan. He pretty much has all the reins in terms of roster decisions. He does have John Lynch as his GM, but really, Kyle Shanahan makes all the decisions. Lynch just says, okay, here you go. Here's your quarterback. Here's your running back. Here's the offense you want to run, defense, so on and so forth. So Parag then comes in because he's kind of like the third man behind the wheel. He's been the guy who's negotiated all the contract extensions for key players, new free agent signings, and it's just a master of making the salary cap work and making deals work, finding loopholes to get out of contracts early for players who start getting towards the back half of their deals. So I've been saying this all week whenever I could and as politely as possible. I know there is a lot of anxiety about not having a manager yet, but I know, Chris, you've brought this up in the chat a couple of times, and I've seen you say the same thing, and I wholeheartedly agree. They're not rushing to this. And I know we're getting up against it. The fixtures are out. Preseason starts July 2nd. Players are going to come back. So that's a week from what? Monday? Next Sunday? Sunday. So I get the anxiety. I do. But you can be for sure and just take comfort in the fact that, in my mind, whoever they pick will have gone through a very thorough vetting process. They're using analytics behind the scenes like they do in the NFL to make good roster decisions, all that kind of stuff. And so all I will say to fans who are still new to Parag, the 49ers in general, is they haven't gotten a whole lot wrong in the last probably 7-8 years. So I would trust that whoever they do end up hiring as head coach will be the right guy. Obviously, there's still some debate on who that should be, but they're not going to rush to it. They're taking their time. And I'll end with this. I think they're purposely taking their time in hopes they can convince somebody they legitimately want to come in. Like we've heard about Parker, and others for the last 2-3 weeks. But then some other names start to slowly appear. Patrick Vieira's come in, obviously Carlos Corberán and others who have been in here. But I still think behind the scenes they're trying to lure a bigger fish. They tried with Brendan Rodgers, didn't get it. Who knows? I think, Gier, you may have said they tried with Graham Potter and others. So I still wouldn't be surprised if it's a name that we just haven't heard. And if they can't lure that name, it's Fark or whoever they determine best between him and Patrick Vieira.
Yeah. Can I add to that too? I was looking at the business side of things with the 49ers and looked up their recent just rankings in the NFL as far as like top revenue amongst the teams in the league. 49ers were 5th. So I think I take comfort in that. You know, you're looking at sponsorship deals, media, revenue sales from, obviously gates, concessions. From a business standpoint, they've done really, really well. So they're ranked right there at the top of the league when it comes to bringing revenue in to the club. So I think, one of the things I've been paying attention to, as Brandon mentioned, just with this transition, not everything is going to, I guess, be transferable. When you look at how things are done in the U.S. with the leagues here to English football, I get that. But basic principles in business are transferable. Leadership is transferable. So I think, they have expertise. They have experience. I get why fans don't trust anything at the moment. I don't blame them. And part of me doesn't either, because just so many unknowns. But if you want a proven commodity, they have it. They have the receipts. They've proven themselves to be competent, professional, good recruitment, thorough, as Brendan mentioned. So that does give me a lot of comfort, and it excites me too. I mean, this, like we've been saying, it's a new era. I think fans should be excited, nervous, skeptical, yes, but excited because, yeah, they've proven in a lot of ways they know what they're doing.
I think there's a space with Leeds fans for a little bit of skepticism for any potential owner. I mean, I'm a Leeds fan since I was under 10, 42 now. So it's, I've seen really good owners and I've seen bad ones. I've seen things from Leslie Silver to Ken Bates and Cellino. And I've seen people strip the club completely of everything to nothingness. I've seen the club become a laughing stock. I've been in Ellen Road when it's been empty in a league match. Do you know what I mean? there's a healthy amount of skepticism that should always be applied to an owner, because ultimately, as good as they are, and I've gone in heavy in supporting the 49ers. So if this goes, arse over head, I'm in trouble. So I've been very vocal about it, because again, to Brendan's points and Chris, to Brendan and Chris's points, if you go back and look at the historical workings of the 49ers, and especially the last 7 years, and bear in mind, 7 years in any sport is a lifetime. That's a huge amount of time. 7 years ago, what we need Gary Monk in charge. If not, it's probably going to Alex's early days of Leeds fandom. So it's, I keep going back to this dossier that they had for the recruitment, that they gave Andrea for recruitment of Bielsa. And the more I read this, I'll go through it real quick. It's Jed York and Parag Murat. They spent 31 days interviewing 23 different GMs and head coach candidates. They took a huge amount of heat from their fans who complained about them taking too long. They favoured patience in their process. Ultimately worked out. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan came in, and they've been a success since then. So as Brendan said, they figured out their model. I'm also okay with the quietness, because again, historically, the 49ers seem to do their work behind the scenes and get it done, and we'll talk to you when there's something to talk about. And I think there's a lot of people saying, well, we want to hear something. We want to hear anything. Just give us an update. And yeah, but you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't in that statement, because if they come out and say something now and say, look, we're doing this, we're interviewing people this week, we're doing this next week, people are just going to say, get on with it. Don't care. Stop talking. Get on with it. Because we've had an owner who has been way too quick to grab his phone, a glass of wine, and Twitter for so long. So if they step out and do that, people are going to complain about it. If they say nothing, people are going to complain about it. But I think they're safer saying nothing and just getting on with the work behind the scenes. They are being diligent. I would hope this is an educated guess, or at least an educated decision, whoever they bring in. I've said today, and I completely agree with Brendan as well. I've been saying this for a while. I think it could be somebody not on the list, and I don't know why, and I can't quantify this for you. I can't put a pin on this, and I can't tell you why I believe this. But there's a part of me thinks it's Darren Moore, and it's growing in me. And it might not be. It could be miles off the mark, but there's just a little bit of it thinks maybe if you go through what they look for on their dossier. Look for somebody who can change fortunes and create a team culture, rebooting and changing a team's fortunes, resetting a culture, looking for common threads, favoring leadership over anything else. That says to me that's Carlos Corberán. That's box tick, 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 tick. He's done it at Huddersfield and he's done it at West Brom. Yes, he hasn't won anything, but he has changed the culture at both those clubs. He has changed their fortunes and made them winning teams. So depending which way you go, it could be anybody, but I've not got a massive issue with the 49ers are doing right now. A couple of weeks' time, that's when we should be having a proper conversation about what's the recruitment looking like. Has the manager appointment the right one? Get into the first month of the season, think, are we going down the right path? That's when. If we don't have a good August, this will, like that, like a fire. It'll just restart. Ellen Road will not have forgotten last season. Not that quickly. And they need a couple of months to forget about it. And if they don't get good football, or at least winning football in the first couple of months, that place will turn on them as well. And the 49ers will have to figure out how to redo it.
I wanted to ask a question to all you guys, because I read the dossier, as Jer referenced, and I read the article today from Graham Smith. And one of the things he mentioned, which was interesting, is not just the traits mentioned in the dossier, but a heavy dose of analytics and setting up metrics. That makes me nervous a little bit, because as a U.S. fan, that's what we've been told is how they chose their national team manager, was based on analytic analysis or data analysis. What do you guys think about that? Just in terms of what does that mean, using analytics to recruit, to make the appointment? On one end, it could be good, because I think a lot of people, based on the dossier, are just thinking, oh, that's Jesse Marsh. It's all vibes. If you're not looking at tactics and you're not looking at winning percentage, what are you just basing it on relationships that you like the guy? But when you talk about data, bringing that into the mix, what do you guys think about that?
I'll be really quick on this. I don't have a huge issue with data as long as you said it's the right kind of data. Your winning percentage, then that's put against the team that you were actually coaching at the time, what their expectations were, what their squad was, what the league you were in. was, where that team historically had ranked in that league. You got to take all that stuff into consideration as well. Like somebody could come out with a 60% win ratio, but they've got the number one team in the league and they've had the most money to spend for the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, that was Jesse in Austria. It was, yes, he had a successful time there, but he had the best players in the league. He had the best side in that league. So of course he should have done well. Even with his tactics, better players will do better things. So I'm not a huge issue with the tactical stuff. I would say with the data analysis, but it just needs to be done the right way. And I think from the US coach perspective, I said this to you guys in the group chat. I don't understand that at all. That bringing back Bernholt, I just think from the World Cup. There was nothing spectacular about the way the USA played football. There was nothing that I looked at and went, that guy knows what he's doing. He's a revolutionary coach. Look at the football they're playing. They were effective, but they weren't. I wouldn't say they were an attractive side. And for me, I think the US team is in the best place it's been in a long time in terms of the caliber of players, and should have done a lot better than it did. To go through all that data analysis and to come back up with him as your top candidate in a world of footballing candidates, that doesn't make sense. So I think
exactly.
As somebody said, I'd love to know what he has on the selection committee, because he clearly has something on them.
Yeah, that's what makes me nervous. Just that heavy reliance on that.
And where, yeah, I think you're right as for terms of picking the right data, but also like we won't go down this rabbit hole. But I think the U.S. Federation's I don't know how to say it. It's a little corrupt. That's the best way to kind of I can put it right now. As far as the manager goes, there's only been a few leaks as far what could be possible. But what do you? I think we talked a lot about Fark last week, Chris, and Gier. I don't know if you guys have anything to add on Fark, Nate or Brendan. And then I don't know, how is everybody feeling? I still lean Cobron. Is anybody else kind of shout out a manager if you don't like any of the ones that have been leaked?
I do. I mean, I don't feel super strongly towards any of the candidates really. A positive sign, I think, is that with the candidates, and you guys might feel different, but I do think with the front running candidates so far, we've at least established a floor. Like there's definitely a floor that all these managers have where we won't end up with an absolute disaster of a manager in the championship. And, you know, maybe I'm digging my own grave with that statement, but I do think we have at least set somewhat of a standard that should be somewhat encouraging going forward. It can only get so bad, right?
Brendan, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it a little bit, and I listened to you guys go back on Fark and a couple others last week. Fark is still my number one choice of the guys that are listed. At least that's kind of like public knowledge of the ones that got in-person interviews. I know we've talked about him before, but his 2 championships, and winning the league in 2 promotions speaks volumes. I know once you get up, and that's the next key. Is he going to be the guy there? That should be up for evaluation when he gets there. And I would assume part of the interview process would have been, okay, what went wrong when you did get up with Norwich? Because we want you to be the long-term guy, whoever we're going to be hired. And then 2, to be fair to Daniel Fark, they never really gave it a proper go. They never really invested hard into the team. It was a lot of the same guys year after year. Like, I know Timu Pukki was a pretty good striker for Norwich, but he was up and down all 4 times with Norwich. Probably should look to upgrade, especially as he was getting into his mid to late 30s, and other players like that. So, yeah, I think I actually really agree with what you said, Nate. The floor of the managers doesn't scream dumpster fire. It right now, like if things were just to stay level, even keel, screams mid-table flirting with a playoff spot. Some of those guys. But I would say out of the bunch, Fark has the best potential to take you into the playoffs or closer to the autos and not having even to worry about 3 through 6. So still Fark for me. I'm still holding out hope that maybe there's another name mentioned. And I think we all know some of the names that we don't want to have come in. So let's hope that some of those guys like the cardigan folk, the cardigan guy doesn't come in. So I mean, I was trying to talk myself into Parker because it seemed like it was pretty real for a little while, and he does have 2 promotions too, but come on. I mean, they were lucky when they got promoted with Fulham in the playoffs. I believe
he had a stacked team, Brendan. Stacked team.
Absolutely. And he has a great team too, so.
I want to touch real quick on Parag. And then one of the things about that he righted the ship, you used the term last week or 2 weeks ago that once Jed York got his shit together, he got Parag in. And one of the things, it was in, I don't want to say financial ruin, but financial instability, maybe the 49ers were. One of the things that Parag is building here, I think he's a master negotiator. And so some of the rumors as we transfer into transfers, into that topic, there's a lot of agents leaking stories about players leaving and all this stuff. I think Parag is saying, take a seat, we'll get to you when we get to you. And, in America, I talked about this a lot. You don't have a lot of negotiation when you're a player under contract. You're under the contract until you're pretty much a free agent. You can hold out at times for more money if you feel like you've outperformed the contract, but it's rare. So I just think Parag, what we're also getting with the 49ers is really good, savvy negotiations. I don't think you're going to see things like, a $3 million release clause on your, premier signing and once you came up and things like that. I don't think you're going to see a Augustin debacle again. So I don't know. Anything to add on that, Brendan?
Yeah, I was just talking with my father-in-law. He was over here just visiting with us, and before he left, we were saying how, there's been a lot of speculation about people wanting to leave and probably agents doing their work and getting guys out. But the fact that nobody has actually left yet, in my mind, I know it's still early days, but still could scream a good thing where they are getting in, sitting down and trying to sell the players on the long-term vision and trying to keep some of the guys around that they legitimately want to have. And I know that a lot of the guys that probably will end up leaving aren't going to be team's first choice, but once you start getting down the list, second, third choices like a Jack Harrison or Robin Koch or others who have had strong links to leave, the fact that they haven't left yet, I think, is not a bad sign. So I can imagine Parag has started to sit down with them, talk to them about the long-term vision, the projects, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to hold out hope that maybe there will be a surprise or two that doesn't end up leaving and staying. And the only thing I will say on Patrick Vieira, if it ends up being him, there is a super, super strong connection to Jack Harrison going back to the New York City FC days. Who knows? Maybe he convinces Jack to stay. I doubt it because I think he'll have enough teams vying for his services, but it's possible. And I'd happily keep Jack Harrison around for another year to get back up, as I'm sure all of us would. So, I wouldn't be surprised if Parag has already worked a little bit of magic and convinced a couple guys. Your best spot is to stay with us. One shot. We're putting everything behind it. We're getting back to the league you ultimately want to be in.
There's something in that, Brendan, because one of the stories that came out this week is that Parag, pretty much straight after the buyout was agreed, rang all the senior players and has spoken to all of them about the project next season and that he's interested in speaking to them, more of them. The only one that went against that was Rodrigo last week. I did the early part of this week where he was asked about his future and he said he hasn't spoken to Leeds yet at all, but his father was supposed to meet Leeds today or tomorrow,
right,
and to discuss the issues there. So there's a possibility there as well. But you're pretty much on the money from what I've heard. Is Parag's first action was ring the players, pitch the project to them, let them know what's going to happen, and then see what they want to hang around for that. Because same with the manager situation, because I mean the names have been mentioned: Parker, Raul, Farka, Vieira, Gerrard, Corberan, Moore, Rogers, Potter, Dal Thomason and Rob Edwards were all the names that have been mentioned. I don't think any of these have been leaked out of the club. Any of them. I think these are just names that have been put out there. The only one that I think is a possibility of a long shot is Graham Potter, because if he doesn't take a job at Crystal Palace and Hodgson stays on, he doesn't have a job for the start of the season in the Premier League. His next option is to wait until somebody gets fired in the Premier League, which means he's taking over a team in the bottom half of the Premier League, potentially fighting against relegation. Why not take over a team in the Championship who have a budget and a team to get promoted into the Premier Division? Take your 12 months to build your style and your culture, get into the Premier League, and then push on like he did at Brighton. But the Jack Harrison thing is a big thing as well, because again, today it was mentioned that in the Team Talk article that they said that when Vieira is confirmed, one of his first actions will be to speak to Jack Harrison about staying on the club because of that relationship they have in New York City. But again, the Team Talk thing needs to be taken with like a truck full of salt, because they have a miss-hit record more than a hit-and-miss record. You know what I mean?
Is that Marshman?
Marshman didn't tweet this one out, no, but the article is from Team Talk. And it's few because Tim Thornton who does Sky and Team Talk. I think are the same company, if I'm being honest, because it's the same people that are both. But Tim Thornton said last week that the manager's situation wouldn't be sorted out until the end of this week, and that seems to be true. That seems to look like it's happened. But whether they're right with this other story about Vieira or not remains to be seen. But it's if it is the case that's Vieira, I mean, he should be able to handle the championship. I mean, he should be above that at least. And in other clubs he's been at, he seems to get at least 12 months of a performance out of teams before things turn sour. The only thing is Simon Jordan said this week on TalkSport about the situation that he'd have a connect. Obviously, Simon Jordan used to own Crystal Palace, so he'd have a lot of connections, people there. He said he hasn't heard anything positive coming out of Crystal Palace about Patrick Vieira, and he heard a lot of bad things behind the scenes in the dressing room about Vieira. So, sorry, he didn't say bad things. He said, I've heard nothing positive in the dressing room about Patrick Vieira.
Okay. You know what's one interesting thing before somebody else can take over?
Exactly.
I don't know if any of you noticed Luis Sinisterra's Instagram story for his birthday the other day, but the decorations were Leeds colors, and somebody was saying, well, like a lot of the people are trying to say, well, that doesn't mean he's going to stay. It could be Colombia, where he's from, because that's also Colombian colors. But who has a birthday and decorates it after your country, where you're from? It's possible, but who knows? And I mean, maybe that just goes back to the fact that Parag rang a bunch of guys up, maybe told Luis Sinisterra, you know, you're a great player. You were great when you were fit, but you were barely fit. So rebuild your value, get us back up and promoted, and then we can sell you for a lot more money. So who knows? I just found it interesting that it was Leeds colors for his birthday.
Well, the fact that he did that, like the communication with the players, is that you get like, I don't know, the fact that the owner, the head owner of the organization, the face of the organization is going to be calling you. That's important, and having one-on-one conversations with you personally. I don't know. I think that's a hopefully a good sign. We talked a lot about the managers and getting it right. I'm with Brendan, and I think Jeers mentioned this as well. Could be somebody that no one's talking about. The airtightness, the leaks that are coming out of the club are far fewer. Usually when something's leaked, it's on the managerial side. I got to talk about this, and I don't know if you guys want to get stuck in on this, but I think this is a massive elephant in the global football world room, so to speak. But the transfers coming in from the PIF are just staggering, and it's coming. Some people were like, "Oh, it's been them off. They're Chelsea, dead weight." But I'm just going to go through some of them. Hudson-Odoi, Bernardo Silva was rumored to be in talks. Koulibaly, Lukaku, Thomas Partey, Ziyech, Mendy, Conte, and possibility of Helder Costa. No, I'm just kidding. But these, outside of Helda, are Premier League level players that are the talent pool could be in the top 5. They could probably still play in England. They could still play in the Premier League, but they're being drained into the Saudi League. I think this is Live Golf 2.0 and a possible merger and an acquisition in 10 to 15 to 20 years. The face of the shape of football is changing. What do you guys think of what's kind of been happening over the early summer window?
This is something that needs serious investigation. What's going on right now? Because Gary Neville said it. And I rarely agree with Gary Neville, but he said this is there's a danger of it damaging the reputation of the football in this part of the world. I mean, the difference it's exactly like Live Golf. They've set up an organization. They put money in. The Saudi government puts money into 4 or 6 of their top clubs. Billions into these clubs, just giving them the money to go and strengthen their teams. And the one that strikes me as a concern is the involvement between Chelsea and Newcastle in this as well, because Newcastle are owned by PIF, but apparently, again, on one of the longer articles in The Athletic this week, PIF are also an investor in the Capital Group who are backing Todd Bowley at Chelsea. So therefore, they have a finger in 2 pies, which you're not allowed to do in the Premier League. You can't own 2 clubs in the Premier League. You can't. You can't own 2 clubs in Europe unless you can prove that both entities are managed completely independently of each other. It's against the rules. The one that struck me was Ruben Neves, who's not an old player by any stretch of the imagination, is probably just in the tail end of his peak, if anything. He is leaving Wolves for a new challenge in a new club, and he goes to Saudi Arabia and is immediately loaned to Newcastle. Now, that to me says that Newcastle knew Wolves wouldn't sell the player to them. That's the first thing. Or they're worried about their financial fair play. Therefore, they couldn't afford to buy the guy because of financial fair play, because there's issues over Newcastle's new sponsor, because that's also owned by PIF. So that's another way. That's the backdoor funding. Well, an owner can only put X amount of money into a club, but the sponsorship can put in whatever the sponsorship can. And that's the same with Man City, what Eddie had as well. So you've got this real problem where all of these players that are going to Saudi, are they staying there? Or are they going to end up at Newcastle? Because of that. And then you've got Kante. Did he go for nearly 100 million? Something close to that? What's he worth? About 25 million now?
Yeah.
And he's been broken for 2 years.
Mid-30s too?
Yeah. So don't tell me that's not Todd Bowley balancing out his FFP budget because to spend 600 million on players. That does 100%. That's what's going on here. And that can't be allowed to be the way they get around financial fair play. Like, there's an owners and directors test in the Premier League, and clearly it's not as diligent as the Championships one, because the Championship one says that you can't have any connections to state ownership. Clear as day. However, in the Premier League, it's like, yeah, it's fine. No issues here. But you're not supposed to be. FIFA once had a rule where governments weren't allowed to be involved with football clubs or national sides. You weren't allowed to interfere. That seems to have gone away. And the difference from, the similarity and the difference from Live Golf for me is this. Live Golf brought in a ton of golfers and huge money. They brought in some older people like Poulter. And if you watch the documentary on it, Poulter says, I'm not going to win many trophies now at this end of my career. This is guaranteed money. This means my kids and my kids' kids don't have to worry about money. Understood that from his perspective. Then prime golfers start going to Live Golf. And Live Golf it's not a success. It's a bit of a disaster in terms of how it's been ran and what's gone on with it. It's not being good. This merger with the PGA seems to suit them better than it suits the PGA. Who is the PIF in football terms? Who are they going to merge with? Is this the beginning of them playing the long game with the a European Super League? Maybe it's a World Super League, and then the Saudi clubs get into it that way.
Super League. Yep.
But
that's
I can't see that happening either, Alex. Though, can you? I mean, after what happened the last time, can you genuinely see people being okay with a Super League starting?
Well, but in 15, 20 years, I think people's memories are short, and I don't know. You got money. If you've ever put petrol in your car, if you're ever getting on a flight, you've contributed to the PIF, and so they've got incredible pockets, and they like you said, they control two clubs in England now, two historic clubs, big clubs. I think. I mean, Chelsea, maybe you can say loosely, maybe not, but they certainly have influence over Chelsea. And then they have a big four, at least a big four in Saudi Arabia. And so you're draining. And then we also haven't talked. I mean, Benzema is at the peak of his powers. He's going to Saudi Arabia. Like it's crazy. And so
here's the question, Alex.
Go ahead.
Here's the question on this. All these players are going to Saudi. If they are loaned back to European leagues, UEFA can't even touch those clubs for FFP because Saudi Arabia is outside of UEFA. It's not under the jurisdiction of UEFA. So these players could end up anywhere in Europe that PIF are involved in. If they're involved with other clubs.
The only way to do it would be maybe the international. You're not competing in the Euros. You're not competing in the World Cup, and I think that was maybe threatened when the Super League first started. So that would be maybe one way. I don't know. You'd have to start hitting the players.
How do you police this? How do you stop it? Because Gary Neville wants an embargo put in place, but how do you legally put an embargo that stops a player leaving your country to go to another country? How do you legally enforce that?
Yeah, and there might even be a number where you say, if I'm Benzema, I'm like, well, I'm done playing for France anyway, so see you later.
Yeah. And the PGA was basically forced into that merger because of the litigation. Like Saudi Arabia was like, well, we have all the money. We'll go to court. Well, we can afford whatever you're going to put up against us. And PGA back to that. They knew they wouldn't be able to afford it, without draining the whole.
But that's why the rules in the Premier League need to be so restrictive on this. They need to be super airtight, because if there is a gap in those rules, and they can, and bear in mind, Man City have already exploited this with UEFA. They were pulled up on FFP. They were kicked out of Europe. They were going to transfer embargo for a couple of years, and they appealed it to the Court of Arbitration for Sport and won, because there was gaps in that legislation. It wasn't airtight. There was rules around it. So Man City got away with it. You ask yourself, why is the Man City investigation taking so long already? Like, I mean, and why was it only this year that they discovered that they actually lied about their financial results in 2017? Who's reading these financial results that come in every single year? You have to submit these, and they have to be approved. Who's not doing the jobs here? Who's missing stuff on this, or is it being deliberately missed? There's so much gray area here that if the Premier League, for example, decided to put a transfer embargo to Saudi Arabia in place, players coming to and players going to, they could do the exact same thing that was done with Live Golf. They could just sue the Premier League and then just go, we've got so much money, we can keep this in court forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
Exactly.
Appeal.
Yep.
They could do 3-4 years easy. And they just damaged the integrity of the Premier League. In the meantime, they flood the Premier League with loaned players from Saudi Arabia. Like, you know.
Hey, Gier, you mentioned before recently talking about, and I saw the report too, about the regulations of players coming in were kind of loosened a little bit. They were changed. Do you think that has any implications?
I don't think with these guys, because the regulations have changed because it's Brexit, basically. So because Britain left the EU, now every EU country is now seen as a foreign country to UK. So there's in Europe you have free movement and employment of residents within the entire EU. So I can go to France in the morning, just get a job. I don't need a visa. I can just go and work in France because I'm a European citizen. When Britain left Brexit, that changed all of their rules around recruitment of players from any country outside of the UK. So this point system is what's in place for visas. You have to have X amount of points to qualify for a visa for a country. Those points are made up out of your employment history. So what club you played for, how many appearances you played, and then what grade that club is in world football. Like you can't have played 200 times for Al Etihad in Saudi Arabia, who aren't ranked as a top 100 club in the world. You know, you don't get any points for that. Has to be a competitive club. And then your international appearances and the grading of your international side are also taken into consideration as well for points. And that if you qualify for the X amount of points, you can get a working visa to come and play in the Premier League. They've relaxed that this year because they were lobbied by the Premier League and Championship clubs. They can now bring in 4 players that don't hit that rule. All these players going to Saudi Arabia are all international players for top-end international countries and their top clubs as well. So they fly through the rules anyway. It wouldn't be an issue for them.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you're talking about loaning players back to the Premier League, if those point systems could be.
There's a lot of loopholes, Chris. It's a I'd be very worried for the Premier League in this moment. I think you're standing on the edge of a precipice here where it could be incredibly damaging to the Premier League's long-term future if they don't stamp down. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody thought anyone would do this. You know, Todd Bowley looks like he's the worst thing to happen to soccer in a very long time.
Yeah. Well, I saw Jamie Carragher posted something just, saying the same thing. Just, this is awful. Something needs to happen. He got trashed in the replies, just like people were saying, like, well, the Premier League did the same thing to Serie A.
Different though.
Why?
Yeah,
I get that. It's just interesting.
They created more.
Interesting perspective just to hear fans' reactions.
Yeah, it's not the same. It's absolutely not the same thing, because
I don't think so either.
Premier League created a brand new entity. There was stuff that went on between the league, the EFL, who weren't in favor of this breakaway league, which became the Premier League. So it was similar to the Super League in a way, because it was a breakaway league from the top clubs. But they eventually negotiated promotion and relegation. They negotiated all these rules, and they also negotiated money down the pyramid system as well, where Premier League revenue would go down the leagues and help the clubs. This is different. This is, in my opinion, this is fraud. This is blatant fraud. We will give you 100 million for a player who's worth 20 million because you can't sign anybody else unless we do that, because you're breaking your financial fair play rules, which is going to put a transfer embargo on your club and kick you out of Europe. So you can't. Now you can, because we just given you 100 million. And essentially, we're giving that 100 million to ourselves. PIF are paying a company funded by PIF. So that money is just going from my current account into my savings account. That's essentially where it's gone. And then you're loaning the player, back, and you're going, like Neves, from an ethical point of view and from just a professionalism. If I was a Wolves fan, I would haunt him when he came back to the Molyneux,
Yes.
because he wanted to leave because of a new challenge. He's gone to Newcastle in the same division, but he went about it a sneaky way. He left the country to go to Saudi Arabia, probably never set foot in it, probably never put his toe on Saudi Arabian soil, and then ends up in Newcastle. And if you're Wolves, you're pissed at that. That's not how you do business. That's not ethical. It's not professional. It's not above board. It's sneaky. And there's a lot of this going on right now. And Newcastle are up to their eyeballs in it, and so are Chelsea.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the. I wanted to bring it full circle and talk about Leeds in the championship. In a way, we're going back into the time capsule. We're going back into Novar, a much more competitive and balanced league. Not right now. No, Qatari or Saudi influence. I mean, there are probably questionable owners, but I don't know. It's old school football. When I look back at Leeds, there's no getting out your phone and taking pictures while everybody's into the game. It's a proper football. It is almost a relic in world football. So I don't know if you guys want to expand on that. Any silver linings you see?
I mean, my first thought is, I mean, the championship is it's a very gritty league with those extra games. And we are a club that did not have a lot of grit in our side last year. So not the most positive outlook, but a huge reason why I would hope and pray Tyler Adams sticks around. I know it's not likely, but that is the one player who showed grit every time he was on the pitch for us. And we are lacking that so much in a league that demands a lot of grit to get through.
I would say too, it's appealing as the Premier League is because it's the top of the top, right? And you want to be a part of it. And Brendan, you mentioned feeling like you got kicked out of the restaurant, right? Like, just at least you have hope you can win something. Because let's be honest, like the Premier League, the way it's stacked, the chances of winning the league against some of those clubs, it's really, really rare. Really hard to do. And I don't know, part of me looks forward to just more competition, more winning possibilities. So I guess that's the silver lining for me. It's not like our expectations are mid-table and that would be like a huge success. This is like top of the league, win the league, different mindset.
Yeah, we've won 16 games the last 2 years, 9 in 2021, 22, and 8 or 7 this past year. So we're going to beat that total in one season this year for sure. And
if we don't, we've done something really wrong.
Totally. And then if you don't, I mean, you're starting to flirt with the bottom of the table and we don't even want to go there. No. So definitely, Chris, a lot more winning is what we should expect. It's going to be a lot more happy Saturday mornings for us over here. Gier, Saturday afternoons for you.
Yes.
All I will say is the last several teams to have gotten promoted, Fulham a couple of years ago, Burnley, others, they always have a goal scorer in the top 3 or 5, at least in the league. And right now, on the current Leeds roster, which I know is going to change, we don't have one of those. And right now, it's just Patrick Bamford. And given his end of the season injury history, they need to sign somebody. So my closing thought on that will be, I just saw Nottingham Forest are probably going to let Emmanuel Dennis go. If he doesn't have any suitors in the Premier League, sign him the hell up, because I would happily take Emmanuel Dennis.
You have Lewis O'Brien there as well as a possibility.
Yeah.
Be rock star, and we're not going to have a midfield because if Adams does leave, McKennie's gone, Forshaw's released, although coming back to train, but you couldn't guarantee that he'd be okay. We're not going to get Calvin Phillips back on loan, even now possibly being the fourth choice central defensive midfielder at Manchester City. He's probably going to go to West Ham or Arsenal possibly. But the silver lining is exactly that. The silver lining is more wins. We should be a better side to watch. The other side to me is this is a chance to do a reset, and I hope it's done. I mean, whatever the conversations are about Pat Bamford pre-injuries or post-injuries or pre-Premier League, post-Premier League or COVID or whatever argument you want to make for Pat Bamford, we have an opportunity to reset this and go at it with a new side. and to go again. And I said on my podcast earlier on, I want to see a new Leeds. I want to see new players, new squad numbers, a new captain. I want to see a fresh approach to this. I want to see the 11 that walk out on that pitch that don't have a hangover from relegation the previous year. I want us to redo this properly, even if we keep the existing squad. I mean the older players. If we keep like Cooper, Forshaw, Ayling, it's 4 years on since they got promoted from the Championship. Their legs are going to be 4 years older. They're all in their 30s now. They failed to get out of the Championship under managers that weren't Bielsa, and then they failed the first year under Bielsa, and the second year he got them promoted. So these players have a history of underperforming even at that level. I mean, one season promotion isn't your history. It's the outlier. It's not the whole picture. The whole picture is failure from that group of players, because when they did get up, they went back down. 2 bad years. So the silver lining for me is that we get a chance in a relatively safe environment, but the Championship is a dirty, filthy, angry league that if you don't have your house in order, it'll swallow you. And it won't let you know it's doing it, and it won't apologize for it. It'll just rip you apart, and you'll be in League One, or you're stuck. The worst place you can get stuck, and we got stuck there for 3 years, is 15th in the Championship, smack bang in the middle of the table, and you just can't get out of it. So this gives us a chance to not have any of that happen. This gives us a chance to clear it out, do it right, get it ready to go again, and give ourselves a chance. And we do go, if and when we do go back into the Premier League, that we're ready for it this time, and the structure is there, and the young players are maybe leading us forward. A couple of cute, smart, experienced signings in there as well. I'd like us to bring in experienced players more so than hang on to experienced players. I'm changing my tune on this, because initially I was like, keep the older players around because it'd be good for the young people. And I keep being reminded that there was an issue in the dressing room last year between the old players and the young players last year in Leeds, and Luke Ayling barking at Chris Somerville for passing the ball out of play. Just maybe there's a split needed. Maybe there's an entire clear out needed there. So you've got that chance in the Championship as well. So yeah, that's the silver lining. I would love, to Leighton's point, I'd love to see Tyler Adams be talking to staying for 1 year. It's 1 year. He's not going to lose out on a whole lot in 1 year. It's not. I know there's Copa America, but it's not a World Cup year. Yeah. So give it a year. Same with Rodrigo. And the problem with Rodrigo is if he goes to Sevilla, it's Champions League football, and he's in his 30s. When is he going to get a chance to get a crack at that again? Probably never. Yeah. So you're kind of, that's a tougher one to hang on to. But the younger players, you should be in a position where you can hang on to them.
I made this tweet. I think I mentioned it in the chat too, but just the idea of him and Tim Ream going to get coffee while they're both injured, and Tim Ream talking to him about, his experience. He's stuck with Fulham. They went down, they came back up. I think they may have gone down again, but he became captain, highly revered at that club, and now look at them. They're doing really well. So I was hoping, hope Tim Reams talked to Tyler. Just tell him to stick with it. Tell him to give him another chance. I think
he was our best player. Tim Ream was the United States best player. Actually won an award for the best player. I think Adams could have been there based on his World Cup performance, but obviously he got injured. He's a really, really good center back. It's a shame he's kind of hitting his stride at 30 in his mid 30s. I think, I don't know. Do you guys have anything else that you want to touch on? I think that's it. We're gonna it's manager watch right now.
Yeah, Alex, I take issue to what you said earlier that it's only been 2 weeks. I feel like it's been 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been the longest 2 weeks. So yeah, I just hope it's something's announced soon.
It has been
madness.
I think the main thing is they had to wait for the sale of this ownership to go through. I wonder if that slowed things up. I wonder if they really wanted to get Areola, and then unfortunately Bournemouth swooped in. You kind of, when things are theoretical, somebody say, well, I've got a hard offer here and it's in the Premier League. And so, it's tough. It's unfortunate. The relegation hurt us. And I think Raz's negotiation towards the end of the season really hurt us. If he was just willing to sell, and this crap over Sampdoria, I think that also slowed the process down. And then I still think that there's going to be a relationship there of some sort. It seems like either the 49ers are invested in Sampdoria to make Raz go away, or whether Raz still has a piece of Leeds United. but at the same time, these guys are interested in winning.
Yeah.
This is about winning and putting in a winning culture, a reset, like you said, Jir. It's a clean slate, and it's an ability to, when we do come back up, we're ready, and we've hopefully learned from these mistakes. So again, I'm a positive person, but go ahead.
Look at who's come into the club. Like look who's in this investment group. Look at the golfers and look at the basketball players. Well, less so the basketball players because they're not exactly New Orleans Pelicans. And not exactly winning stuff.
No.
But Ricky Fowler is worth $40 million. Right, he is a former world number 4. He's a top premier athlete in golf. Right, a winner. You've got Justin Thomas worth an estimated $60 million, a 2-time major winner and 10th in the all-time earnings list, a winner. You've got Jordan Spieth, 120 million estimated value, 3-time major winner, 7th in the all-time rankings of earnings, and probably one of the best golfers, if not the best golfer in the world right now. So you've got out-and-out winners that are coming into the investment pool, and they're going to want to they're not only investing to get money back. Yeah, because golfers have way too much money and not enough time, and way too much spare time, more so than footballers. So they're not just investing in this to get money back from this. They have money. They don't need more money. If you have 120 million sitting in your bank account, you don't need any more money. You're not spending 120 million. You're just not. But take any kind of money, go and buy a car. Your interest has already filled that gap. You know what I mean? You're not losing money here. So they're not just getting involved in this from an investment perspective. They want to get involved in a winning team. They want to get. They've all looked at Wrexham. 100%. A lot of this has been helped by the fact that what happened at Wrexham. They've seen that. They've seen taking something from down here and bringing it up here and seeing the reaction of the people, seeing the stadiums full, listening to that place. The romance of it is there as well. The bit inside of a sports person that's like, I want to do something you see it in FIFA, the computer game all the time, right? And other sports games. Roads to glory. I want to take a team at the bottom and bring them all the way to the top. Then I know it's achieved something. Yeah. So that's it's Football Manager, FIFA. I've always done that. A lot of people do that. You go in, you take over a Conference League team and go, within 10 years we're going to win the Champions League, and you do it. So there's a romance to that as well. And I think that a lot of these sports people, Larry Nance as well, and the same with TJ McConnell, these guys will want to see something that's actually achieving something. And I think the York family and Parag have seen what they've tried to build at the 49ers. They've got more opportunities to win things here than they possibly do in the NFL. I mean, you've got the Super Bowl, and even with your best team, when things go wrong, like they did last year for the 49ers, and you lose 3 of your quarterbacks, you're in a situation where you're like, it doesn't matter what we do today, we're not winning this game. Yeah. So even when you get to the promised land, it can fall down. But they'll look at this and they'll go, you've got a championship. And if you get out of the championship, you've got the League Cup, you've got the FA Cup, you've got maybe a push for European nights, and it's a long time since I've seen a Tuesday or Wednesday night Champions League game in Elland Road, and I only watched them on the TV, but there was nothing like those nights under the lights in Champions League football in Elland Road. So they'll know all of that. They'll have watched the documentaries, which I think are also a huge selling point for Leeds to these people as well. You watch Take Us Home and tell me you don't fall in love with Leeds United by the end of that documentary. You watch
That's what happened. That's what happened to me. Yeah.
I'm not too proud to say this, but I cried when we got promoted, and I cried at the end of that documentary the second season when we got promoted again. I got all emotional watching it again, seeing Marcelo walking around the place. I was like, he turned into everybody's granddad. I mean, that's what he was, like, just this lovable man who showed you around his club. And that's all part of this as well. You look at Academy Dreams, and that's the future of the club. That's a selling point to all of these investors as well, of going, look what's coming through this club. It's not just the first team that are trying to do something. Look what's coming through. This club has its house in order, kind of, behind the scenes.
But Jared, doesn't it also speak to, you mentioned all the things that we've also had access to see, right? Mm-hmm. The documentaries, the history of the club, what's known. They've seen what we haven't seen. They've heard about the project. They're seeing the blueprints of what's coming. Yeah. We haven't seen that, and that could include the manager, it can include the stadium, it can include other investors that are coming into this. And that's what excites me too, is they're privy to information that we're not, and the fact that they're interested in it beyond the winning. Of course, I think that drives everything, but yeah, they're seeing things that we haven't seen yet, that we don't know.
Excites me, Chris. That really excites me. Like, this is why I'm so down on Patrick Vieira coming in as a manager, because he doesn't excite me. And
Well,
I'm genuinely so excited about what's potentially happening with Leeds and where this could go in the next 2-3 years. And I'm like, I can't wait. I cannot wait. This is
so
it.
last night I spent I was like, okay, I need to do something to try to get excited about Patrick Vieira. So I have to try to convince myself there's some positive about this. And one thing was interesting. Someone posted a documentary, and New York City FC did, and he walks in to get introduced to the club, and there's Andoni Iraola, shakes his hand, and then I read Iraola actually credits him to helping him form his coaching perspective, aside from Bielsa and the influence that he had, but he points to Patrick as helping him. And I do some part of me I would love to see what Vieira could do with JB and Nanto and Rutter with the French connection, and there's some of these players potentially he could really get something out of them.
I just don't think it's a style of football we'll like. I think it'll be a slow defensive style of football, and then I could be wrong, and I said this earlier on. If he does take over, I'll 100% back him. I backed Jesse Marsh probably way longer than they should have last year, but I wanted us to be successful, so therefore I needed him to be successful. So you backed him because of that, and I'll do the exact same with Vieira, but the but is I just don't. I mean, it fell apart after 2 seasons at Nice. It fell apart after a year at Palace. Simon Jordan said that he hasn't heard good things behind the scenes about Vieira's style and management style. And I just don't think we need any more drama. I think we need a cool head that can just come in and just cut the crap, get rid of all the drama, and just focus on the football and give us something to get behind and get on board. Because if we go out in the first game of the season against Cardiff and sit in the back five, no one's going to be nobody's going to be excited about that. We're going to be going, what are we looking at here? This is the future of the club is sitting back and defending in the championship.
I don't think it's Vieira. I don't think it's him. I actually don't. I don't think it's Vieira.
I hope it's not, but also at the same time, I do hope that he's learned from the mistakes that he has made. And I've played for coaches that didn't last long when they were the manager teams that I played for. But at the same time, I learned from them. I learned some great stuff from people. I learned that there were bits that I would keep, and there were bits that I would definitely never do. And I mean, learning is not just learning from the person above you and getting all the good stuff. Learning is also realizing what you want to make sure you don't do. I can never fall into this trap. I can never fall into this habit of doing what he does because it doesn't work. So you learn that way as well. But I mean, there's one coach that I played for, and I described him as the best tactical coach I ever played for. We won nothing under him. He got fired after 6 months. But the best tactician I ever played for. The worst fitness coach I've ever played under. We weren't fit. We couldn't run, but we understood exactly what we were supposed to do. We played some lovely football for 40 minutes in the game. Then we got tired because we did no fitness work because he expected us to do that in our own time. So he could focus on tactics. I learned a huge amount from that man, but I also learned a very heavy preseason of fitness work is needed for this to work.
So what we're all saying, long-winded way, is they better get this manager appointment right.
They have to get it right.
They have to get it right.
This is the most important one for them. This is number one.
Sure.
Get it right and you're okay.
Gio, you said earlier, we're not going to, the fans are still going to be hungover because of relegation, and they're already not trusting in how long this process has taken. So if you do go out, you lose to Cardiff, you draw to Birmingham, you draw to West Brom, or lose to them too, Ellen Road's going to get toxic within the first 3-4 games, and that's not a good look for them to go through there. And I was thinking about this just looking through the fixture list again. I don't know why I'm drawn to this team, oddly, of a team I don't want to become. If you get off to a bad start, you have owners that aren't, I think they're totally competent, will do a good job. I just don't want to become like a Stoke, who just get caught in the middle of the table all the time and just have no hope in getting out anytime soon. Just don't become Stoke. Don't become Bristol City. None of those teams.
That was us for a very long time, Brent. Don't forget that when Stoke were in the Premier League, we were stuck slap bang in the middle of the championship and could not get away from it. So it's easier to get sucked down then than it is to get out of that.
Absolutely.
But Brandon, I have a question for you, though. Knowing the 49ers and how they went through that process with Kyle Shanahan, are they looking to have someone that just gets us up and then go from there? Or are they going to look more long-term? That's something I've been thinking about with this recruitment process, because who they hire now is going to inform us as far as okay, the main goal is just to get up. And then there's a longer-term project, or is the manager going to be the manager now who they hire? Is that going to be part of the longer term? Because Kyle Shanahan's obviously a long-term appointment. They didn't just see him getting them back to reputable, heights in the standings. Like he's been there for almost 6 years. So
For sure. And I know it was his first head coaching job, but he was very well sought after by so many people. So I don't like comparing other head coaches or even this
yeah,
to the Kyle Shanahan situation because he's just so unique.
it's just the goal. Like, what's the goal now?
Yeah,
Is the goal
for
for them just to get up, or is it
sure.
get
Like-
up, but also have somebody in place that's going to stay on in the Premier League?
And this is going back to why I think they're taking a little bit longer, is hoping that they do find that guy that's a perfect blend of both. That even though if they might not be tested in the championship in terms of getting teams out on first go or second go, having a guy who is good that can get you out very quickly and keep you up for years. But the names that we've seen mentioned don't scream that to me.
There is one. There is one. Raul.
Yeah, Raul. That's what I like. That's what I want. I want.
Well, outside of him being who he is, outside of him being one of the best players to ever play for Real Madrid, outside of that, putting that to one side, and again, going back to what you're talking about there, he's not a head coach. He's the head coach of a B team. He is their reserve team manager. He's Castillo's, Real Madrid Castilla, who play in the third division now. He's and this could be a delay as well. He's a playoff final to play yet with them. So he's still in a job working on this. So if they get promoted, he's into that's a huge job. But he's also being lined up by half of the ownership. Lockie did a really good piece on this as well. And he showed me a thread on it. The more you read the thread, the more you fall in love with the guy as an idea, because he has a culture. Like the players come in there, he makes sure they all wear tracksuits. They're not allowed to wear their own clothes. There's no headphones allowed in the club area. You're not allowed to be on your smartphone. It has to go away. There's a huge amount of things that he insists on. Creates a culture. And then again, if you're going back to that piece about Kyle Shanahan, he's not the head coach of the first team. So therefore, are they looking and going, well, no. But if you're smart, if you can do it, and you can get the next big coach before he becomes the next big coach.
Exactly.
I mean, we tried it with Heckenbottom, and we were probably a year too early. Like Heckenbottom, we laughed him out of the building after 6 months, and now look at him, he's a Premier League manager after getting Sheffield United promoted. So it's a timing game. But if Raul would tick the boxes there, but half of the ownership of Raul want him as the new manager to replace Ancelotti, and another half don't want him. And it will depend on where that ownership model goes there. Or he could just decide, nah, you know what, I'm going to go and try something else. And he might do that. He might fit that box perfectly, but he's in a job, which means it might take longer to get him out of a job, which means it might take longer to process. If he could walk out that job on Wednesday next week when their finals played and then come straight to Leeds, it could be next Wednesday. So he's the only one that if you followed exactly what they did with Kyle Shanahan, kind of looks similar to that. But they might not do that this time. They've been around for 4 years. They've seen what's gone on with Leeds recruitment. They might have an idea themselves.
Yeah.
Kyle Shanahan is very innovative. Like if I'm a passive NFL fan, he's one of the most innovative coaches. He's in a time that where the running game, the ground game, this kind of slow and methodical is going out the door. Kyle Shanahan has reinvented, and he's actually competitive with almost no quarterback. He was able to kind of like establishing these kind of runs with these like really quick athletic players. Anyways, I guess my punchline is if it is a 49er club model, they're going to go after somebody that is young and innovative as the key. And that's why I think I hear Cobron, but I don't know, the Rolodex like they do. But go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah. Vieira's only 47 also, so he's young. Sorry, Brendan. But he's
no, for sure.
Yeah.
Like the only thing that I'm kind of holding out hope for now is if they do go the Kyle Shanahan model, that they're purposely feeding out who's getting the interviews, like Parker and other guys like that, to cover up the tracks of a guy they legitimately actually want behind the scenes, to not get other teams to look at it. Like if it is Raul and they just don't want other teams to be like, oh, he would actually be a really good hire now that we do some investigating on him. Let's put out the guys who are retreads that other teams might want, might not want, but let's keep our true want and desire behind the scenes and quiet and not feed that to the media. So, I mean, they don't leak. We've been saying they don't leak, but there's a reason why we know Parker, Vieira are in the running, because they've leaked it. And maybe they want that out there to cover up the tracks of somebody better.
It's possible. It's
going back to what Jerry, you said Darren Moore too. Like he's under the radar too. No one's really considering him as a actual reasonable, having a reasonable chance to get the job. But like, there's a lot of, if you read about him, he fits the profile as well.
He struggled at West Brom, but he wasn't the only manager that struggled at West Brom. They're a basket case behind the scenes. They're not set up. I mean, Corberan did really well, but that's just Corberan, and there's no guarantee he'll do that a second year with them. So you can't take that into consideration. You 48% win ratio at Sheffield Wednesday, which is It's a really good win percentage. And why has he left Sheffield Wednesday?
Exactly. And the
Just got
player,
promoted.
yeah.
Why has he left?
And he was loved there. Like the fans, the players that played for him, they're really upset. Like it's not like they're like, okay, get rid, bye. You know, they can't believe he's left. They don't understand why.
He does have a very attacking style of football as well. He does like to go for it with teams. I mean, especially in the playoffs, they just
yeah.
They had to.
And when he went to Wednesday, one of the first things he did, and this is what reminded me of Leeds, was he looked at the defense. They had given up, I don't know, over 30 goals the year before, and that was the first thing he did. He shored up their defense, and they drastic improvement in their defense. And then he built the attack and the style of playing out of the back, which he said took a while for the players to adjust to. But just some of his, had an open door policy with the players. They really communicated well with him, changed the culture. And so I don't know, like part of me is like interested. I find him to be interesting. I don't know how he would do, but interesting.
Yeah.
My final question is, does Leeds United hire a manager tomorrow? Yes or no? Chris?
Tomorrow. No.
Brendan?
I'm going to say yes, just because.
Okay.
I want to be different. Do I actually think they will? Actually, I'm just going to stick with yes.
Sure.
I would have said, I said in Joe's show last week, they'll name a coach this week, but it won't be anybody on the list. And then Joe came on my show. Well, didn't come on my show, but he was tweeting my show while we were live, and he was saying, it's Vieira, it's happening tomorrow. Trust me on this. I've had 3 different sources confirm this to me. It's happening. Now, normally I would say, we're all YouTubers. Do we really have that much contact with people that really know? However, Joe was the first person to say that Leeds had contacted Marcelo Bielsa, and he'd been told from somebody around the club that Leeds had reached out. The 49ers reached out to Bielsa. It was denied by the club and everybody around it, until it wasn't denied by the club, until it came out that, yes, they did. They had a Zoom call with Marcelo Bielsa before he signed his Uruguay contract to try and convince him to come back. Now, Joe got a bit of stick about it because Leeds didn't hire Bielsa and nothing came out of it. But when this came out, it was like vindicated what he had said, because he said they'd rang him. They had rang him, and they did. So he was 100% correct on that. So now I'm in this bit of going, he's probably right. Probably right. It'll probably be Vieira tomorrow morning.
Put it out there again. Yeah.
But if it's not tomorrow, if there is no announcement tomorrow, then I don't think it'll be Vieira.
Yeah,
I agree.
That's what I'm holding on to.
For all my life, man, I'm clinging to that. I just don't want to see it. So never know.
I'm gonna say tomorrow. I'm gonna say no. So we're split. So it's a 50-50. Yeah, I don't know. I just think I don't think they're in a hurry, and I think they have to line up a lot of press release stuff, a lot of glossy photos, a lot of that stuff may, I don't know, have to be leaked. There'll be people camping out of Ellen Road for that type of stuff.
It's not happening in Ellen Road though, Alex. The interviews have been done in London.
All right. Well, maybe they're doing it in a press release style, but I don't know. My gut says no. Maybe I'm wrong in that, of which 50% of this podcast will not be relevant, but that's the way it is. So this is a closed live recording. I want to thank Chris, Brendan Panikkar, and Gier Lynch. I premiere it at 9:00 on the U.S., so it's ready to go for the U.K. in the morning. So it actually streams like at early in the morning, like 4 a.m. or so. And
we don't do it
one
live.
of the yeah, well, I streamed it live, and I was actually just checking out on the comments and stuff. And people kept saying, "Gier, I can't believe you're up. God, you're like, this guy never goes to sleep." And I had to go.
I was up. I was up.
Were you up?
Yeah.
I said, hopefully he's in bed getting a good 8 hours.
I was in bed, but I wasn't asleep. I get these bouts of insomnia, so I can there's nights where I just don't sleep. So yeah, it was one of the nights where it's really hot over here at the moment. Like it's now 10:30 at night and it's 65 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's like for us that's
hot for you guys.
It's not comfortable. And our houses don't have air conditioning in them, so it's fans. So
but everybody
you do take time off and you're not constantly streaming
Saturdays and Sundays.
24 hours on channels. But Jared, thanks so much for your contributions
My
to
pleasure,
the
man.
community and to this channel. Brendan, thank you again. Massive resource about talking about the 49ers. Chris, thanks again for all that you're doing at Chris Fox 75. Follow him. Yeah, thanks everybody. We'll talk next week. Good stream.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.